Okay, so boom, I think we're live. If anyone in the group can see this, if you could just sort of text that everything's working and you're looking at this. Catherine, thank you for joining us.
Hey, you're absolutely welcome.
I'm just looking in my group and seeing if this is working. Okay, it looks like we're on, and let's just give it a few minutes for people to tune in.
Okay.
Looks like we've got one eyeball. If you're seeing this, if you wouldn't mind just writing a little comment, hi, so we can see who's tuning in.
I actually saw briefly the window on my computer screen and then it disappeared.
Okay, so it's working. We're in here. We got Catherine. She's on here. Emily's on there. It looks like it's people are starting to tune in. So we'll give it a couple minutes for people to kind of get on. But I wanted to thank Catherine for coming on. So just a little background. I wrote a pretty scathing email, and Catherine can say if she thinks it's scathing. Looks like we got Rachel, Jessica, Brent, Kimberly. Awesome. So I wrote a scathing email to you, to Murray, to everybody on the board, and I attached the petition that I had to eliminate the mileage rule, and I could talk to you about why I sent it to the board. But anyways, you and Murray were the only people that responded to that, and I really appreciated that. And then I had some great conversations with Catherine. My impression from Catherine is she's sort of been in this fight to really change things here, change the sport in general for a long time, for a lot longer than I've been at it. And now she's at the top of the food chain as a board member, and was a straight shooter and totally willing to talk about all this stuff, and definitely on what I call team change versus team status quo. So anyways, with that, I'll let you maybe introduce yourself, Catherine, and we can get started.
I'm Catherine Haddad Stoller, and I've been a professional in the business for 30 years, a bit more than 30 years, 20 of which were spent in Germany. I had my own training business there, and I developed top competitive horses and showed an international competition represent to the United States in end of 2012. And I've been here ever since. And as Brian said, trying to fight the good fight and trying to implement some changes in the sport on this side of the ocean, sort of integrating what I learned while I was in Europe and hoping that we can do some improvement on our sport on this side of the Atlantic.
Great. Well, I love that premise, and we'll go with that. There's been some requests to see the top of your head, Catherine.
To see the top of my head. Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
How's that?
I think that might be a little bit better. Okay, so that's a great premise. I mean, I guess the premise would you say is that Germany has the best federation in the world? My understanding is they have the biggest federation. They've got some great policies, and if we can talk about, I mean, a big principle in business is just modeling the best, right?
Yeah, absolutely. What you can say about the Germans is that they are extraordinarily organized from the very bottom to the very top. And I think because of their organization and their ability to streamline the professional sport on that side of the ocean, they're also able to keep costs under control. So, for instance, if I want to register myself as a rider in Germany, it's a yearly fee of about 100 and can't remember if it's 120 or 160 euro, and that's because of the high license class that I hold. And my yearly my lifetime registration for a horse is somewhere around 43 euro in Europe. That'd be about $50 to register it for the lifetime of competition. But the biggest change in fees comes when it comes to entering a horse show, because all horse shows in Germany are basically there's no such thing as a non-approved horse show. There are exhibitions, but there are no horse shows that are not run through the German Federation. And even at the smallest possible horse show compared to the largest possible horse show, if the classes are being held at the national or CDN level, the entry fee is the same. So you would pay, as a dressage rider, for instance, 20 euro or $22, $23 to enter a test 4 weeks ahead of time at the closing date. And then if you showed up, you would pay a starting fee of another $20. And you would do that at the equivalent of our training level, and you would do that at the Grand Prix level. you would also do it at a backyard horse show, and you would also do it at a top national horse show, like say Munster in January. So it wouldn't matter whether it was what we would call a Class A show or a Class D show. The entry fee for a national class is the same.
Yeah. And that's huge. I mean, one thing that I feel like in the States is a lot of people can't afford to get good, because as you get better, as they start raising the jumps or start doing better tests, it costs more money. And that's kind of confuses me, because it's the same arena, it's the same people there. It's just sort of like, as you get better, things get exponentially more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Versus, in most sports, I feel like they get less expensive when you get better, almost in some ways, right? Because there's more prize.
But it's not even it's not even a question of becoming more skilled at your sport. Anyone can compete at global dressage in Wellington. You don't have to have a skill set to compete there. All you have to do is be able to pay the entry fee.
Yeah.
So there's no pre-qualification unless it's an FEI competition.
Other than financial, that's the only.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about national level. So if you want to go compete in Florida at the national level, you don't need a skill set to do that. You need a big pocketbook. So you end up getting a lot of people competing at what would be considered a higher level competition with no pre-qualification to make it a higher level competition. You could compete against people who are not as skilled and talented or have as good of horses at a show like that, compared to someone you compete at. Like a local show here for me would be at Sussex in northern New Jersey, and I might have more skilled people competing there than I have at global, but it's still rated as a smaller horse show.
Yeah, and that's those principles are exactly what I've been hammering on about, that are baked into the USEF system, which is basically we give our riders different classifications here. I mean, you hear this a lot. I'm on the A circuit. I'm very comfortable on the A circuit. I take people to the A circuit. But all that means is that you're competing on a circuit in the hunter jumper world. You can tell me the dressage, that it's got a bigger arena, that it's got bigger bleachers, that it has more divisions. It doesn't tell me anything really about your riding, what you're saying. And all those things, more prize money, all those things just increase the cost. So it's just telling me that it's just telling me you're in a certain tax bracket and you like horses. Versus maybe you can tell us how they give different class riders. So what I've seen about USEF is you've separated the riders by their tax bracket, basically, with the A, the B, the C. Like if you're in the global thing in Wellington, it just means you can afford to enter. I mean,
well, I don't know that you can blame the federation for that. That just is, it happens to be how the sport has evolved in this country, and we are continuing to evolve it. And I can tell you, in the 7 years that I've been back in the country, leadership has changed in the last 2 to 3 years. And we have a leadership now that's very, very interested in expanding the sport, but maybe just this leadership needs their attention brought to some smaller details, which would help expand the sport and would change some of these issues that you're talking about, in particular, the affordability of riding at a higher level competition. What happens in Germany is this. Germany has a license class system for its riders, and it has a prerequisite system for the horses that are entered in tests. So as a rider, you have to take a test to get your very first baby license class to go compete at any horse show. You have to basically ride through a competency test and be licensed to go to a horse show. Once you go to a horse show, you have to get, it's either 3 or 5, I can't remember exactly, placings in a certain level in order to get the next license class. So you start at license class 5. In order to move up to license class 4, you have to have several placings. So when you have license class 4, you're then allowed by each individual horse show, to compete in a higher competition. So in dressage, it would go like this. I would get a competency test. I would go then compete in a very low level training level test. And until I had placed in the top 5 in that test 5 times, I wouldn't be given license class 4. But once I get license class 4, I can compete in training level tests, and then I can compete in first and second level tests. And it goes on from there all the way up to license class 1. And then what happens is that each individual horse show sets a prerequisite on the class. So if you have, let's say, a riding club putting on a very small national horse show, and again, remember the entry fees are the same across the board. So this small local riding club says, we're going to sponsor a horse show. We're going to put a horse show on. And we want to give our members a bit of an advantage in getting placings. So we will say that in training level tests 1 and 2, the only people who are allowed to compete are people from riding club, say Riding Club Gladstone, and the neighboring club in Bernardsville, and the neighboring club in Bridgewater. Okay, so they would take 3 neighboring clubs and allow them all to compete in those classes, but you would have to have the license class in order to do it. Those people would then have a little bit of advantage in that they could just compete against the locals, and if they got a couple placings, eventually they could get license class 4. Now, by the time you get up to license class 1 and 2, I have, for instance, license class 1. Basically, the prerequisites on the classes for, let's say, Grand Prix dressage at the national level would be any show in Germany, in the entire Bundesrepublik, would publish an omnibus that would say, we're holding a Grand Prix competition on June 22nd and 23rd. The Grand Prix will be on Saturday. The Grand Prix special will be on Sunday. And the prerequisite for showing in it is you have to have license class 1 or 2. And if you have license class 1 or 2, the entire country of Germany can show there. But if you have license class 3, we will allow our local competitors to show. So again, they would give a little bit of an advantage to the local competitors and allow them to show in the upper level. Now, what would change about, and this would be, if the horse show were that big that it was hosting Grand Prix and Grand Prix Special, it would probably have stars attached to it. It would these are S classes in Germany, so it would probably be like an S3 star for dressage. And what differentiates that show from the local riding club show is that there's bigger prize money. Now in Germany, there's set prize money for every class. So even if I go to the local riding club and I pay my $20 to enter, or $20 to enter, $20 to start, I'm probably, if I win the class, going to get back $50. So at least my entry fees would have been covered. When I go to a 3-star Grand Prix national competition, I'm going to pay $20 to enter the class, $20 to start, and there might be a $5,000 prize. So that's one of the things that changes. But the other thing that changes is you're only at a Class A show in Germany. We call that an A-rated show. You're only competing against people who have earned their license class 1 and 2.
Yeah.
So you're only competing against top people in the sport.
Yeah. Let me clarify a couple of things. So one thing is people are like, oh, this is dressage. This is totally different. But one thing that I
same in jumping in Germany.
Exact same principle, right? In Germany.
Exactly same principle.
I think that we've gone, and so that's one reason why I think it's important to have you on, is I want to unite the disciplines. I think they should all be following the same principles, like what you're saying. And I was in Germany for 1.5 years, and every show I went to, there was a dressage show going on concurrently. You'd see the same horses, the same young horses go ride a dressage test, and then they just go over to the jumping ring and jump the jumping thing, and they're all. It makes sense, right? I mean,
yeah.
And I know in France, it's the same riding schools that will teach you dressage, jumping, and cross country. It's not like it's here. We've sort of gone out of our way to separate everybody, and people don't even understand. I mean, the rules are so different between the disciplines here that.
Well, in Germany, it's not so much that you get so many competitors crossing over. There's a few young horse classes where they'll cross over. Generally speaking, people branch out. They do dressage or jumping, but every single show has dressage and jumping at it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would go pull up on one side of the parking lot. The jumpers would go pull up on the other side of the parking lot. They would go to their arena. I'd go to my arena. We'd all share the same food concessions and beer stands and beer gardens. And I would go watch the top jumpers, and they would come watch the top dressage occasionally. Yeah. So, it's much more of a cohesive. We're here for horse sport for the weekend, and this is what we do. And it's not so much that people cross over. You're just at the same venue, which is kind of fun, and it's especially fun for
now
because you can't hear a pin drop at a dressage show in Europe. You've got jumping horses right next to you, crashing fences, and usually there's dogs running through the dressage arena, and children are making noise, and it's a real environment. It's not this very cloistered golf club, quiet please kind of environment.
Yeah. How important is that? How important is that to you in terms of when you're talking about bringing over some of the ideas and models of Germany? How important is that to you to have different sort of classifications? I mean, my feeling here is if we have a Grand Prix here, we're like, hey, enter it, please. Anyone enter it. We don't care how good you are. Please enter. We can't even find somebody to do this. Versus, it sounds like in Germany, they're like, no. Like, you can't enter this unless you're a level 1 rider. And so that's a big difference, is where they're purposely making it hard to get in. Versus here, we're like, hey, go buy a meter 60 horse and just enter it. We don't care. Or go buy yourself a top dressage horse. Who cares if you know how to ride it? Just enter.
It is.
How
That is an
important is
unfortunate.
that to you to bring over a system like that, where riders actually have to demonstrate that they have a certain ability, that they can, like, as a principal, how important is that principle to you?
Well, I think for sorting purposes, meaning for the categorization of your horse shows, I think it's absolutely necessary. I don't think, we really, in this country, have to be very careful not to limit participation in the sport, because we don't have the numbers that they do have in Germany or the other strong equestrian countries in Europe. So we don't want to limit our entries. And I'm, quite frankly, not against in dressage, not against someone buying a schooled horse and getting on it and trying to compete at that level. But anyone who goes through my program is not going to do that without learning to sit the trot and learning the basics. But that's me. Okay. Now, there's a lot of trainers out there who will put people on horses that are further trained than they are and let them bounce around through the test. I do not approve of that. I do think that a license system would prevent that, that practice. On the other hand, like I said, we can't limit participation. So we have to be very careful that licensing is available to people, and that people who've already achieved a certain level in their sport, whether it's jumping or dressage, are able to get the license that allows them to continue to compete at that level. But I do think that in categorizing horse shows, it's a very logical, very organized way to go about separating an A show from a B show, because quite frankly, if you're at an A show, you should be competing against the best in your country,
Yeah.
the best competitors available. You should not be separated by your checkbook or your banking account.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. And I have a theory that we're almost seeing better horsemen at the C shows than we are at the A shows right now, because we've priced out so many people. And generally, there's a lot of good horsemen that are priced out, because the way that you get money is generally not from riding horses. So when you can afford to go to an A show, it's probably because you've been having a real career instead of, spending all day at the barn. So you get all the
or you're selling really expensive horses, or you have a sponsor, or there's a lot of ways to
there's
get
a lot
to
of ways.
the A circuit without being an extraordinary horseman or super talented. And you're right, there are a lot of very talented horsemen competing at what we would call lower ranked horse shows, and they're making the most out of the horses that they have, which
Right.
they're taking normal horses and turning them into something extraordinary. In this country, unfortunately, the culture has been to buy, for people who are at the top end of the sport, have access to the best horses in the world. They have the money behind them. They either have the sponsors or the owners, and they have the money to get their hands on the very, very best horses. And the art of making a top Grand Prix horse in dressage or in jumping from your local, trainer, or someone local, that art almost doesn't exist. And whereas it exists in Germany. I mean, you can drive around Germany and the local riders know how to make a Grand Prix horse. They don't have the material that the top people have, but they still know how to make a Grand Prix horse.
And I think that gives everybody hope. Like, I'm trying to breed my mares right now, because I don't know that I'm going to be able to buy my kids $1 million horse one day, but you at least have the hope. You're like, hey, there's at least a chance here I could make like an incredible horse. Like, obviously the chances are low, right, that you're going to make this. But I think when I was in Germany, I noticed everybody kind of had that hope. Everybody sort of had a story of like, oh my God, that breeder down the street. You remember Fine Sarah? Like, he bred Fine Sarah, and this is the rider that he rode Fine Sarah as a baby. Like, that's something that people have been talking a lot about in the group, is how important it is to be breeding and following horses. And but I think that's all baked into the federation's systems, because the system will pull you in Germany along that way, where you've got the 4-year-olds, the 5-year-olds, the breeding is synced up to the situation. You were saying that you can't just enter the Grand Prix in Germany. You have to demonstrate with your particular horse that you're riding. You have to get a placing at training level. Then you have to get, even if that horse and you could go straight to Grand Prix, like you have to at least just sort of cross your T's and dot your I's and bake it all the way in. And I think that we have we sort of have like a false feeling in this country where you would, if you weren't into horses and you say, okay, this is the A circuit, you would sort of assume that we had a policy like they do in Germany, where this is all the best riders. And we don't. So people get this false sense of like, oh, I'm on the A circuit. But
you are able in this country, in the United States, you're able to buy your way into the top end of the sport without having a lot of previous training, good basic riding, good basic training. You are able to buy your way into it. So, but you're able to buy your way into it in Germany too. It's just probably not going to be as successful as you would be in this country compared to what would happen in Germany.
Yeah. Well,
so you can buy your way in Germany just by spending a lot of money on fantastic courses and going very quickly through the license class program to get your highest license class, especially in jumping. I think it's probably easier in jumping than it is in dressage to do that. But you know, let's face it, a good financial backing paves the way in this sport, no matter where you are in this world. But the larger difference between, let's back up a minute. Let's go back to breeding for just a minute. The Germans, the Federation does track the breeding of all of its top any of its sport horses. If you enter sport in Germany, the pedigree of your horse will be tracked, and there's breeders' cups that you can enter. There, and breeders they're basically celebrated in Germany. I was given an award. I was awarded the silver pin of the Oldenburg Verband before I became known as an international rider for the breeding program that I had. So, and later, Richard Spooner ended up riding a jumping horse that I bred, and the horse went a kind of circuitous route through Europe through a couple trainers up to Sweden, and then Richard Spooner bought it there, and I found out later that we had a top U.S. rider on one of the horses that I had bred. But I only knew that because the Germans tracked my breeding success with the horse. So that's another thing that we don't do here. And that goes back to a passport system. Every horse that's born in Germany is issued a passport and a tracking number. So, and a microchip at this point. So everything that horse does in its life gets recorded by the Germans. The Germans are fantastic at keeping records.
Yeah.
So our federation, I think we've been looking into a passport program. In fact, I know we've been looking into that, and we're just now starting to issue U.S. passports for horses, horses in general. But of course, the American Hanoverian Society issues registration papers. But I personally think we need a passport system. When horses are born in this country, they should be issued a passport with a microchip number. And as a federation, it doesn't matter what sport it is, whether it's Arabians or saddle seat horses or Morgans or dressage or jumping or eventing, that horse's sport pedigree, if you will, should be tracked along with everything else.
Yeah.
Then it's easy to reward your breeders, the people who are successful in breeding.
Yeah. What about at a certain point, right? All the breeds are named after places in Germany, right? There's the Holsteiner, there's the Hanoverian.
That's right. They're named after breeding regions.
Oldenburg.
Part of the problem here is that when I just went through a registration process for a young horse that I own, and I had to register it to compete with the United States Equestrian Federation. The lifetime registration was $115. Then I had to register it with the United States Dressage Federation. No, that was $115. With the USEF, it was $300. And then if I want to register it with the American Hanoverian Society, that's another registration fee. And all of those things get tracked, but they get tracked in 3 different places. And you don't get the United States Equestrian Federation tracking the performance of a horse the way the German Federation would.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's that's an issue. So like when I go to enter a horse show in Germany, everything is online. All of the equestrian entries are online and they're all in one place. And when I go to click on entering Grand Prix for Saturday, June 22nd, and I have my list of horses that I've put up that could be put, and that's the other nice thing is I can enter this Grand Prix and I can put up 3 possible horses. And on the day that I show up, I tell them which horse I'm going to start with. How wonderful is that? Because I mean, who's lucky to have 3 Grand Prix horses? I did at one time, but how many times have you had a horse pull a shoe the day before a show or get an abscess or whatever? You can't take that horse. You take another one. But I lost my train of thought. So you can enter that class, and where was I going with that? Oh, and then if those horses were not qualified, the computer would not accept the entry for that horse. So all of that goes into the computerized system in Germany.
Yeah.
Like you can't just go, oh, I'm going to take Mickey Mouse with me. They'll never know. His age is trackable and his performance record is trackable.
Right. So somebody was saying that microchips is a better way to do that instead of passports, which probably makes sense. But
true. And I don't have a problem with skipping the whole paper thing and just doing a microchip. I personally think that we should really set up a microchip system where the horse is registered with a microchip and his vaccinations are recorded on the microchip.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times do you go to horse show and you've got to print out the frickin'
Coggins.
vaccination, the Coggins, the blah, 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 blah. You send a horse to another stable. You've got to get it from the vet, email, whatever.
Yeah.
And I know there's applications on the phone now where you can keep track of those things, but why can't this just be kept on the horse's medical chip?
Yeah.
We've talked about that actually, and here I'm getting into, everything that goes on in the committees at the United States Equestrian Federation is confidential, so I have to be careful. But I can tell you that when I first came back to the country, I did work with the vet committee, and we spoke a lot about doping, anti-doping, how to control medications, things like that. And at the time, there were quite a few hunters that were having problems in the show ring, either dropping dead or they were over-medicated. And part of the issue, my husband is a veterinarian, so he knows the ins and outs of this. And part of the issue is you would have people on the hunter circuit taking a pony to 4-week show in one region of the country and then packing up and going to another 4-week circuit of shows. And they wouldn't be showing the medical records from each vet to each vet. So the horse might end up with dexamethasone, a 6-week supply, and then the next vet gives him God knows what else. And then he could be on 3 or 4 drugs and no one's writing it down anywhere. The trainer is probably, but no one's really paying attention. And if you had all of that kind of medication record entered on a microchip, then our horses would be a bit safer. Now, that's probably going to be a controversial thing for me to say online, but I do firmly believe that. And, obviously, if you're home and you're out of competition and you're treating something, I don't think that, it necessarily has to be entered in the horse's record. But if you're at a horse show and something gets treated, it should be entered in the horse's record.
Yeah. That's like, you see people will go to like 5 different doctors and get Vicodin, you know what I mean? And that's the same sort of concept you were saying is, I don't even know if we have that with, I guess we do with people, but they still find a way around it where there's not one centralized database where a doctor can log in, like, you got Vicodin from 4 other doctors today. What's going on,
Right.
But I guess, you started to talk a little bit about you said after you registered one horse with the American Hanoverian Society, the U.S. Dressage Federation, and USEF, it's like $500 or $400. And, if you're a professional and you want to have 10 horses or something, like, it's just ridiculous.
Outrageous.
Yeah. How do you start to bring the cost down from,
well,
why is it so cheap in Germany? Is it subsidized by the government? Like, why is it so expensive here to do the same thing?
Well, the reason that it's expensive here is that we have a much smaller base to draw from. So we have 100,000 members in the United States Equestrian Federation, I think, including fan memberships. So, and Germany has 800,000 or something. I don't quote me on that. I don't know the exact number. So the problem is the number of people using the system at the U.S. Equestrian Federation don't support financially everything that has to be done to keep a horse registered, and don't support the federation in that way. But it does sort of exaggerate or extrapolate this problem with wealth, because when I lived in Germany, I would register 6, 7, 8 horses a year that were coming through my stable to show. I can't afford to do that in this country. So the registration process within this country is actually geared toward taking money from the elite athletes. I mean, who pays $300 to register a horse for life? That's and then you have to pay $300 to get an FEI passport. So if you buy a new horse, I bought a new horse in Denmark last year. I just registered her for life, $300, $115 to register with the USDF. If I want to get an FEI passport, I have to pay another $300. That's $700 that I've just spent to register the horse as a U.S. horse competing for the United States internationally.
Right.
And it would be 1/4 of that in Germany. So I think the reason is because the Germans are registering more horses every single year, and they have a streamlined system. They have a computerized, streamlined passport microchip system that's been in place for years. And the Federation, it makes money doing other things. Part of the entry fee for your class goes to the Federation. Part of the branding fee for branding your foal goes to the breeding association, to that federation. So, whereas I don't know how much of our entries go to the federation in this country, but to enter a show here, just to enter one dressage class at a local show, the class itself will cost me $60. And then on top of that will be a drug fee of $25. I think it's $25. It's $23 or $25. There will be an office fee of $35 that goes to the show organizer. Some horse shows will have a trailer in fee if you're not stabling there, like Global in Wellington has a trailer in fee of $90 a day. I mean, it's outrageous. For one class, you can spend $200.
Yeah.
And you have to enter it at least 2 weeks in advance, sometimes 3, sometimes 4 weeks. And if your horse has an abscess on that day, you lose the whole thing.
Right.
Whereas in Germany, you pay half. You pay much less. You pay $20 to enter, and $20 on the day that you can start if you show up to start.
Yeah. Well, I think people in the thread here, like me, we love hearing that there's a USEF board member that is sort of sympathetic. Because I mean, you're paying it too. Like, you're a competitor, you're paying it too. Like, you feel for 20 years, you had an affordable system where you could register horses and compete. And now, the last 7 years, you're back here, and maybe you're feeling price gouged like all of us when we, for me, like, because I own a farm, it doesn't feel like buying the horse, keeping the horse, riding the horse doesn't feel like the cost prohibitive thing. It just feels bad when I try to go compete, especially when I live back in California.
Sure.
So people are asking, what are the solutions now that you are on the board? How can we fix this?
Well, this is a very good question, and you and I have had a couple conversations about it.
Yeah, I know.
I absolutely feel that we have the right president in place. I think that Murray Kessler is a person who's very concerned about the sport and also growing the sport at the bottom. It's been given a lot of lip service since I've moved back to the country. There's been a lot of talk about growing the sport at the base. I don't think that a lot of people here truly understand how to grow the base. And the biggest difference between the sport in Europe and the sport here is the sport in Europe is a professional industry, and the whole sport is geared toward the professional rider. Whereas here, the whole sport is geared toward getting the amateur rider into the show ring. And I think this is why we have the disparity. In Germany, you have a whole base of professional trainers who are educated at rider schools. I mean, a rider is a professional rider. They're educated at a professional riding school. They are taught how to teach other people. They're taught systems on how to teach people, how to train horses. They're given a license to do so. Everything has to be licensed in Germany. You have to have a license to buy toilet paper in Germany. Okay. So you need a license for everything there, but you have a lot of licensed professionals that are producing well-trained horses and are producing well-trained riders. And they're also able to show. I lived there for 20 years, and I without without a lot of financial support, maintained my own training business for 7 years. Then I got some support from my first American sponsor and was able to jump into the international arena. And the big change for me then was that she helped pay, or actually paid all the expenses with a professional trainer that I wanted to work with. It wasn't so much that yes, she did cover my showing costs. But the thing about showing in Germany internationally is you give up your entry fee. It's 300, 400, 500 euro. You come home with 5,000 or 6,000 in your pocket if you do well.
Yeah.
So I was able to make a living in Germany, and I showed internationally every third weekend and nationally every second weekend.
So was your living off prize money?
No, the prize money basically covered, I mean, it helped.
Yeah.
I did a big competition. I sold horses. I trained and sold horses for a living.
That's like a big difference is you're producing and selling horses.
Mm-hmm.
And then in America, you're teaching amateurs.
Yes.
That's like the big fundamental difference there.
I'm still training horses and I'm selling a few, but I don't, the type of horses that I produce, this is really strange. The type of horse that I produce is mostly sold in Europe. So most people go to Europe to find the kind of horse that I produce. And I have a hard time attracting the market now that I live in America. I used to sell tons of horses to America when I lived in Europe, and now people want to like bypass me and go to Europe to buy that type of horse.
Yeah.
Because they think it's too expensive here, and then they go there and they spend more.
Yeah, but obviously those two economies are related, right? I mean, the Americans are buying horses from the Germans. Their economy is selling horses here. We can't really produce horses here because it's too expensive, and that's why it's cheaper over there.
Yeah, that's the other problem.
But again,
I breed here as well, and interesting that we're having this conversation now. I just sold my top broodmare here, and I've decided to stop breeding in the United States because I can't make it financially viable. In Europe, I did. I made money with my breeding program, but I can't do that here. So I'm stopping to breed on this side of the ocean. I'm going to continue to breed in Germany.
And is that because the shows are too expensive to? No,
it's because it's too expensive to raise horses here, and there is very little market for foals. Now in Germany, I made, the foals I didn't want to hold on to, I could sell and break even on my breeding expenses. And then I did hold on to a couple until they were 3-4 years old. And I either sold them then or I sold them as Grand Prix horses. And I did very well.
Yeah. But again, how do we, I know we've talked about it. Like, how do we
change it? Well,
I mean, like there's some things that you brought up, right? You've brought up that Germany has much more. I mean, their classification is based on merit, not amenities. Mm-hmm. With their horse shows. I mean, if you go to an A show, you're dealing with people that have demonstrated through their placings. And is there also a curriculum in there as well? Like to be a level 1 rider, you have to go in front of a professional, and they have to watch you ride and score you, and your show record has to show that you're a level 1 rider.
No, as a professional rider, you go to a school, you go to a rider school, and you have to pass written tests. You're schooled on everything: horse management, taking care of students, keeping your books, what's allowed for your taxes and what isn't, all that. So you're schooled on everything. And then you have to go apprentice with someone for 3 years. And then you have to pass oral and riding exams, both in jumping and dressage. Even if you only want to do dressage, you still have to pass a jumping test. It's a lot like the British Horse Society test that I passed when I got licensed.
Yeah.
So, and you have to spend about 3 years doing that to become a licensed professional in Germany. Now, that's different from your riding license. A riding license is something that a professional rider can achieve and also an amateur rider. And there is no separation between an amateur who has license class 2 or a professional who has license class 2. There's no such thing really as an amateur circuit in Germany, although there are some classes now that they designate for amateurs. They got the idea from here. But generally speaking, in the 20 years that I lived in Germany, the amateurs competed against the professionals. But, if you were competing at a high level, you were a professional.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. I mean, basically what they're doing is they're thoroughly educating and training and mentoring riders at the federation is. Yes. And they're really understanding how good you are. Mm-hmm. And so it's not really.
Yeah, the talent comes in with what you achieve in the show ring. So everybody gets a rider license. Everybody becomes a licensed instructor going through the program. You might fail it. If you fail it, obviously you don't. But you can have 20 people come out with a riding instructor license. Doesn't mean they're going to be Isabel Vert or Marcus Beerbaum or
Yeah.
you know, they may not be a top rider. They might just be somebody who teaches at a local club.
Yeah.
The thing is, we don't have club level here. That's a problem. We don't have club level, and meaning we don't have riding clubs in this country like what exist in Germany. We don't have riding academies here. If we had riding academies that you could open up at the grassroots level, that were academies that not only trained local people just to the basics in riding, but in doing so, those students were trained by riders or professionals trying to get their license. If you could license people in an academy setting while they're also training local people to ride, you would have kind of a grassroots entry level that would start producing more people that would come into the sport. They would learn to ride on school horses.
Right.
And school horses, I mean, let's face it, we don't have horse slaughter in this country anymore. And I'm not a huge fan of slaughtering horses. Don't get me wrong. At the same time, every top professional in this country, everyone who owns a farm in this country knows that sometimes you have a horse that either needs to be retired or needs to move on. And it costs money to retire horses in this country too. So, you know, you could easily find 3 or 4 more years of use for a horse that you've been competing on if they could go into a school program and just be used at training level. People could learn to sit the trot on them. Not everyone's going to want to do that with their horse, but it could be a donation type program. So that might be one outlet for horses. You know, say you have a dressage rider. They trained their horse up to Prix St. George. The horse can't go on to Grand Prix. He's 17 years old. The amateur can't afford to keep 2 horses. What do they do with him? They have to find somebody to give him to. He could go to a riding school and he could teach for a couple of years. Now, some people would think that would be a horrible thing to do to a horse. In Germany, it wouldn't be. The horses are very well taken care of. And it's not like they do 6 lessons a day, but they can come into a program where they could be somebody's teacher. So I do think that the lack of riding academies in this country is a problem for us, because that's where people enter the sport. That's where they get their first experience with the sport. And right now, I mean, I live not far from New York City. There's probably 600,000 kids in New York City who would love to sit on a horse.
Yeah.
How are they going to arrange that? Where are they going to do? How are they even going to try?
Yeah. Well, that's exactly where I've landed too, and where I'm going to be pushing things, because it is kind of a cure-all. Because, and it's funny, so many horse trainers like you, my understanding, you want to focus your career sort of helping horse owners go to horse shows, maybe. And that's such a small pool of people, right? I mean, there's how many USDF members are there?
USDF?
Yeah.
We have the largest affiliate of all the affiliates. We're even bigger than Hunter Jumper, I believe. And I can't remember what the number is. I did know.
Ballpark.
I think it's 60,000.
Okay.
I could be wrong.
Okay. So if there's ballpark 60,000 dressage USDF riders, but the reality is, for me as a business person, if I'm talking to you as a horse trainer, is you should own a riding academy. And there's 38 million horse enthusiasts, like you were saying. Like in New York, there's all these kids, they want to ride. But all the trainers are all focusing on, once you own a horse, once you know how to ride, which is small, then I'll take you to the shows, then I'll put you in full training. Whereas if somebody like you owned an academy, I think it's a better business, and it's sort of what the sport needs. And then if the federation can help you out, and you should have instructors that work for you who make a living, right? Now you're educating the instructor as well. And
I already do that in my own stable on a very small scale. I have my own personal pipeline in my business, but I'm one of very, very few people in my sport who does it.
You mean riding? You already have a riding academy?
A very small one, yes.
Yeah.
Because I teach people, young women and men who want to become professionals in the sport. I teach them how to become professionals in the sport. I put them through a kind of rider program. And I'm only able to do that because I sustain a few sales horses.
Yeah.
So those are the horses that they learn to ride and train on. And then when a horse gets sold, it finances basically their education and hopefully a little bit left over for me. But because of the cost of showing in this country, I have one really talented girl who's working for me right now, and I really wanted her to pursue showing one of the horses I had bred came up to Grand Prix this year, and I really wanted to send her to 3 or 4 or 5 horse shows to get experience showing a young, underdeveloped Grand Prix horse, developing Grand Prix horse. And I couldn't do it. I had to take her off the horse because it was too expensive, and the horse needed to have scores now, and I had to do it myself.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't pay for her to gather that experience. Whereas in Germany, I would have been able to. She could have gone to 6 local shows. I would have spent €300.
Well, that's my number one, but that's my number one idea, bringing it back that the Federation, I mean, every horse trainer like yourself shouldn't be reinventing the wheel of this is the trainer program, this is the academy, this is the teaching here, like they do in every other country.
Mm-hmm.
And if we really supported, I mean, that's grassroots. Everyone's like thinking that we're going to fix this with a horse show, myself included, but really we're going to fix it by having a better sort of, program that faces the kids, the people that are going to start getting into this. We need to,
by educating professional riders, and professional teachers, you will start to solve the problem. Yes.
Yeah. So anyways, but moving back to horse shows, we got a good question here from a horse show manager, Chris Coleman. He says, who puts on the horse shows in Germany? Are they professional horse show companies who look to maximize profits, or are they volunteers or nonprofit clubs? Are they subsidized by the government or the German Federation? And then I just lost it. As a horse show manager, how can I charge a $20 entry fee and award $5,000 in prize money?
Right. Well, at the lower level shows, at the smaller shows, let's call them the D shows in Germany, they would be put on by a local Reitverein. A Reitverein is a riding club.
Yeah.
And what would happen there is that basically the president of the club and his secretary would handle all of the entries. They would get volunteers from the riding club. It's a big deal to put on your horse show every year. Everyone's very proud of what the riding club does. And I would tell you that at every national show, there's a riding club behind it. It doesn't matter whether it's a D show or an A show. At every national-based show, there's a riding club behind it. And those riding clubs are huge, and the yearly show is the biggest thing that the club does. Everybody turns out. They handle the gate. They handle the concessions. It's a fantastic group effort, and everybody's extremely proud of it. But what happens is the prize money at these horse shows come from local sponsors. Because there's a lot of spectators at horse shows in Germany. So local businesses pay, like say I'm riding at a lower level show and the total prize money for the class is €300. That would be put up by the local bakery or the local paint store, or there might be a big, as the shows get bigger and the classes go up to higher levels, because a local show might only have classes from, let's say in dressage, training level to 3rd level. But as the shows go up in difficulty and you get up to Prix St. George through Grand Prix level, it becomes an A show because it has bigger, better sponsors. There might be a nationwide sponsor, like a feed company. The feed companies sponsor a lot in Germany. They would put up prize money. They would also put up money to actually run the show. But the costs of running the show are not passed on to the competitor. Competitors are treated in Germany like guests. And the horse show organizers will do everything they can to attract the best possible competitors, and they treat them very, very well. I have to say, I was shocked the first time I went to a show in the United States after 20 years away, because I went to a show, I'm not going to say where I went, but I entered an international level show on the East Coast, and I've never been so badly treated in my whole entire life.
Yeah.
I'll never go back there.
The long and the short of it is, they're not getting subsidies from the government, the shows. What the show managers have learned to do is to draw crowds, which, has advertising.
So the sponsors want to do the advertising. And yes, there are also professional horse show organizers who handle the top shows. Those are professional organizers, but they make their money from the sponsoring, not from the riders.
Yeah.
not from the entry fees.
Yeah,
It's a big difference.
that is a big difference. They can
Yes.
draw crowds, and then those crowds have value to the advertisers. But you also said something. You said that the federation sets the prices of the shows in Germany.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can't, like, if I was a horse show manager in Germany and I wanted to charge, all these fees,
Mm-hmm.
and the federation won't allow that.
No, national shows in Germany, the entry fee is set across the board for the whole entire nation. And it doesn't matter if it's D show or an A show. If I'm going to show third level test 1 at an A, B, C, or D show, it's going to cost me the same amount. What might cost me more at a larger competition, because when you have like license class 1, like I do, you can go to any competition in Germany. So I might make a drive from Bremen in the north to Munich in the south, which is 8 hours. The drive is going to cost me money to get there. And by the way, if you ask for a compensation for that, most horse shows will give it to you if you're a top rider, because they want you to come. I'm going to pay for stabling there for 3 or 4 days, so that's going to cost me a couple €100. But I'll probably travel all that way, because if it's a big enough show, I'm gonna earn the prize money. So I'm gonna either break even or come home with a few €100 in my pocket, maybe
Yeah.
1,000.
And is there a limited amount of licenses? Like, let's say I went to Germany and I said I want to put on a horse show. Would the federation say, is there like a mileage rule, or they say, look, we already have too many shows going on that weekend?
As far as I know, there's no mileage show rule in Germany. At any given weekend in the summer, within 100 kilometers of where I lived, I could probably choose from 3 or 4 horse shows.
Yeah. Now, why is it that supply and demand can works in Germany with horse shows, and I know they're different.
Larger number of competitors. Also, because you have this distinction between, because the category of the horse shows is clearly distinct. So within that 100 kilometer radius, there might be 2 B shows and 1 A show.
Yeah.
But the market wouldn't sustain 3 A shows.
Yeah.
So sometimes when I lived there, we would go to one show on Friday and another show on Saturday and Sunday, because we would take our beginner horses to the show on Friday and we would take our advanced horses to the other show on Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah.
So that was possible there too. The mileage rule, I think it's because we just don't have enough demand. We don't have enough riders to support a great number of horse shows in an area. But for instance, in Florida in the winter now, we've made several exceptions for out in Loxahatchee near Wellington. There's always a USEF approved horse show, and it's very close to the ones at Global. But we make exceptions because it's 2 different sets of people who show at those 2 horse shows. So the ones who can afford to spend an awful lot of money go to Global, generally speaking. And the people who are just trying to get experience for their horse in the show ring go to the one in white fences. So there are some exceptions made.
Yeah.
I don't know that the mileage rule is really your enemy. I think we need to, as you have said from the very beginning in the opening of this discussion, we must create more demand at the ground level. We need to get more people in the sport. For a country this size to have 100,000 people as members of the federation, and those 100,000 people are almost all of them are geared toward the elite level of sport in whatever sport it is they're doing, whether it's reining or Arabian or dressage or eventing. The people who join the USEF are the ones who are interested in top sport. Whereas in Germany, if you belong to a local riding club and you've only ever done training level once, you still are a member of the German Federation. You're a full member. Because you can't show at any horse show in Germany without being a full member.
Yeah. Gotcha. So but I agree. I mean, we need to, and for me, the riding academies and helping them market, helping them source horses, helping them, providing more benefits, giving them the curriculum. I think that's going to be an important thing. But then, what it ends up, once you come into the sport at that level, I mean, you're going to get priced out as soon as you find out what it costs to join the associations and go to the shows. And so it's two things. I mean, one, you've got to, I think we need to grow that riding academy programs. And then we also need to bring the cost down. And I think that's an interesting model, what you were saying in Germany. I mean, they have no mileage rule. And the differences that I see is that the United States Federation is limiting the amount of licenses they give out to managers. They control that. But they don't control what managers charge. You can charge whatever you want. It sounds like in Germany, hey, if you anyone can put on a show, I guess, as long as you meet their requirements. I'm sure their standards are a lot lower than ours. Maybe not lower is not the right word. They have less standards to put on a show.
Well, at a D show, what I would call a D show, they don't really have that categorization in Germany. But if I called it a D show, I might actually be doing a training level test in a cornfield that's been leveled and had a rope put up around it.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why you try really hard to get your license class higher so that you can go to the bigger shows where the footing is good.
Yeah.
But it costs you the same.
But they force the managers to get that money from the sponsors because they won't allow the managers to just raise the entry fees.
There's no way for a manager to make money on entry fees.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting that
That's different.
Would you support that with the US Federation to say, listen, you like horse show managers, you have to charge this much. You can't charge more. And if you want to make money, you have to go get it from the advertisers. Would you support that policy?
We could try.
Look,
we could try, but we don't have a big tradition of sponsorship and advertising at horse shows here. We do in the jumping world more so than in the dressage world, which is part of the reason that we have to start joining dressage and jumping horse shows. Because if you're using the same venue and you're making that, just two different events at the same venue, then your sponsors have a bigger reach to a bigger crowd. But we don't really have the tradition here where spectators come to a horse show. Now, if you were bringing in a lot of people at the ground level from, like if you say you go to a local riding club show in Germany, all the parents, all the kids, everybody who's involved in that show, everybody who they know is coming to that horse show because it's also an event. There's beer, there's pretzels, there's music, there's food concessions, there's stuff going on. Whereas at a dressage show in this country, it's pretty hard to get spectators to come. And I do think one of the main things we need to start doing is combining dressage and jumping shows and using the venues for two things at the same time. Number one, it spreads out cost. It would really certainly help the sport of dressage. It increases horsemanship because the sports at least watch each other, which is quite helpful. And as far as limiting, what an organizer can charge, I don't know that if you ever get that past the organizers in this country, because they're going to complain immediately. They're going to say it costs me more money to put on a show in Morven Park, Virginia, than it does in Sussex, New Jersey. And that's why my entry fees are different.
Yeah.
Because they're making their money off the entry fee.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily support that. I mean, there's things in Germany, right? I mean, to me, that's like almost un-American, right? I mean, Germany has no problem. And the other thing about Germany is you basically have to be a member of the German Federation. You can't put on, I mean, they just have a different government and culture there. Like I could right now, I could go put on a horse show in my own farm right now and not get USEF's permission. But in Germany, you can't put on a show without, the Federation's permission. They won't.
Done.
It's not done. Yeah, it's not done. So those are just different cultural things. And then, it
would probably also be illegal. I'm sure there would be some illegality to it. I don't know. But
in Germany, you're saying here it's not illegal. There's more freedom here, right? I can put on a show if I want to. I can charge whatever I want to charge. And I like that. That's why I'm against the mileage rule, because to me, that's the one part that isn't American, is that they're telling me like, no, you can't put on an A show. Only that manager.
They're protecting their organizers is what they're doing. They're protecting their organizers. And that maybe that is something that needs to be looked at in a different way. I personally think that the organizers in this country. I mean, they now have a tradition. Our horse show organizers, and thank God we have horse show organizers.
Yeah.
They have a tradition now of making their money from the competitors. So that's how they, especially at a dressage show, that's how they earn money. And they don't earn a lot. I mean, I know
Right.
some local ladies who put on some small dressage shows in this area. They don't earn a lot. God bless them for doing what they did. But they also didn't pursue local sponsorships. And that's where I believe at the smaller level of showing in this country, we go wrong. You need local support for horse shows in order to defray costs and take some of the burden off the competitors. And I personally think you should offer prize money at every single show. There should be some prize money offered. Now, you can go to a local dressage show here and you can win a body brush or a $10 gift certificate to Dover Saddlery or something like this.
Yeah.
But you can't even get your entry fee back.
Yeah.
Whereas if you got the local doctor's office or the local hospital or the local bank to sponsor that class, you should at least be able to give the entry fees back on a graded scale so that the winner gets more down to the last person who places. In Germany, it was traditional to give the last placing person, so 6th or 7th in each test, a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
You didn't hear that, did you?
The
person who placed last in each class got a loaf of bread.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it was kind of traditional in the local riding club shows.
Yeah.
You got money. You got like €10 or something, but you also got a loaf of bread.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, my question is, I like all these concepts, a lot of the same concepts that I've been thinking of. Like we need riding programs, we need riding academies, we need federation curriculum and merit-based classifications that eventually tie into the horse shows. I think we don't have the numbers to separate all the disciplines to different places. We need to combine the disciplines so we at least get the numbers and give managers, and I'm not anti-horse show manager here, I'm just looking for solutions to bring the cost down for everybody, to bring the numbers in, and it's a win-win for everybody. And then that allows the managers to at least have a chance, get some spectators, get some sponsors, start passing the cost to advertisers. And my question is going to be getting into, where does the rubber meet the road, and like, how do we actually create programs? You're on the board, you're now in a position to influence. But I guess before we get into that, let's take some questions here from people. We've got some great comments, but are there any particular questions you want to ask Catherine right now? And then I want to steer the conversation into like what, because I love having these exploratory, conversations, and everybody gets heated and everyone has a different opinion. But at some point, I want to, like, can we pick a rule change? Can we pick a program? And how do we actually make a change here? I'm
plugging my phone in. That's why my video is going a little weird, because my phone's moving around. But there we go.
Yeah.
I really only have about 15 more minutes. Then I have to go teach a riding lesson.
Okay. Well, we'll wait and see if we get some questions here. If somebody wants to chime in with a question, feel free. Okay, Kathy, what are you specifically doing to make change since you were inside the board?
Well, on this particular subject, I have not been able to create any movement at all, and I haven't really even turned my attention to it. I've been focused on many other issues inside our sport and there's really only been a few that I feel like I've been able to make major change on. One of the most contributions that I made during the time that I was on the doping, the medications committee, and the other was with Safe Sport. So, that test that you have to take now to get your membership, the Safe Sport testing that you have to do. If you're angry about it, you can blame me for it, because I was one of the people who insisted on that. I was on that task force. We have not discussed this particular subject within the board. It can be brought up, and I'm happy to bring it up. It's not this whole concept that we've been discussing has not really been discussed as an issue per se. There is, like I said, a lot of service being given toward trying to create a groundswell of people coming in at the base of the sport. good ideas on how to make that happen. It was just that system was already in place in Germany. I didn't have any part of the process in implementing it, and we're going to have to bring our attention now. To be honest with you, I don't know what I personally can do other than bring ideas to the board. So if we have people out there who have really good concepts, I'm happy to hear it. I am personally an advocate of the license class system for riders so that we know what type of riders are competing in each competition, and therefore we classify our competitions with an A, B, C, or D rating by the license class of riders that are competing.
Yeah.
I'm all for that, and I would be happy to stand behind that kind of proposal. As far as getting riding academies started and getting the federation behind that, we have our affiliates, like the USHJA,
Yeah. That would be more for them, I guess.
The USDF. They have traditionally been the organizations that concentrate on education. So. Yeah. But I do feel like there could be a better connect between the U.S. Equestrian Federation and those affiliates in creating more groundswell, if you will, getting more people in at the ground level of the sport. And I've been here 7 years. I've been doing a lot of observation. I've talked to a lot of people. When I first came here, I offended a lot of people because I had very set ideas about how things should be done. And what I have discovered is that I was a little bit naive. This is a huge country. The sport is very different here compared to Europe. And we probably are going to have to implement a slightly different system.
Yeah. Well, so a couple comments. I really appreciate the safe sport thing. I know that some people are mad they have to take a test, but let's just face it. I mean, kids are being abused at epidemic levels. So anything you can do to make things safer for kids, and that goes back to growing the sport too. I mean, if we're going to be riding academies are places where kids can ride. So to me, that's a huge accomplishment. I think that you were able to make things safer for kids. So let's not. The second thing is I'm glad that it's surprising that the board hasn't talked, because I mean everybody I talk to is feeling price gouged and we're pricing out more and more people. And I think that does need to be a conversation that the board is being like, this is a problem. I'm
happy to bring that up at the next meeting.
Like I said, I'm not anti-horse show manager. I think there's some great managers out there, and I think they deserve to. They're doing a great thing. I mean, I'm looking for the win-win, and I'm not married to any solution, whether it's the mileage rule or whether it's something else. But like, how do we bring?
Well, I mean, we are brainstorming here, and one of the things that has occurred to me is that if you could find a way to get the federation to match funds that an organizer raises for a horse show. So if an organizer says, "Hey, I've got this much, I've got 2,000 in sponsoring," and the federation says, "We'll give you 2,000 to match that, but with that, you have to reduce the entry fees or provide prize money." And in Germany, the prize money is always scaled to what level of horse show it is. And also how many entries are in the class, that kind of thing. And you could easily create that kind of scale in this country. So, if an organizer said, "Hey, I raised 4,000 in sponsoring for this horse show," they report that to the federation. The federation could say, "We'll match your 4,000. And now you give back to the competitors by giving them this amount of prize money in each class."
Right.
Because that already reduces your entry fee, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, now you're
talking. But then you'd have to have an organizer who was motivated to do that.
Right.
So they'd have to take their cut. But I do think that getting more sponsorship and getting more businesses involved in these kinds of events is very, very important, even at the very lowest scale.
Yeah.
And for sure in dressage, that doesn't happen. I don't know about the hunter jumper world here, but for sure in dressage, it doesn't happen. I've been many times to horse shows at Gladstone for hunters and jumpers, and I don't see an awful lot of advertising at those.
Yeah. Okay. Here's some more questions. Would an intern in Germany be able to show in the advanced level?
Would an intern? You mean like someone who's going through the Bereiter program? If someone is coming up the levels as a Bereiter, Yes, they would be allowed to show, but only if they had earned their license class before going through Bereiter School or while they were going through Bereiter School. Yes, absolutely. If you earn your license class, you're allowed to show. It doesn't matter if you're going to school or not.
Yeah. Isn't the mileage rule in place to prevent riders or horses from pointing at 2 shows per weekend?
Say that again.
Isn't the mileage rule in place to prevent riders and horses from pointing at 2 shows per weekend?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I'm not very familiar. I mean, I know about the mileage rule. I'm not familiar as to why that was implemented in the first place.
Yeah.
I think it prevents a lot of things. It prevents competition between horse shows, and it may also have to do with the point basis. We don't have that kind of point basis in dressage, so.
Yeah. Are all the horse sports controlled under the German Federation, English and Western?
Yes.
Guess what disciplines are? I mean, they have the same thing. It's like endurance, reining, right? They have reining in Germany.
Yes, they do now. Driving, even Freizeitpferde, which means hobby horses or horses that are not in competition.
Yeah.
They can also be registered with the German Federation.
Okay, here's I had an earlier question for Catherine about the placing system to move up through the levels. Do you have to place 1st through 5th or 1st through 10th, etc.?
First, usually in Germany, it would usually be 1st through 5th. Sometimes 1st through 3rd, depending on what it was you were trying to achieve. To get license class 1, for instance, I think you need to do, no, maybe it is 1st through 5th. In order to get your gold medal for riding in Germany, at the time when I earned it, you had to get 10 placings 1st through 3rd in Prix St. George or above. And that was not easy to do in Germany at the time.
Yeah.
But to get the highest license, to move up the license classes, it's generally speaking 1st through 5th placing. Now, the placings in Germany are much harder to get than they are in the United States. In dressage, I don't know about hunter jumper in that regard, but in Germany, in dressage or hunter jumper, it's very hard to place 1st through 5th in anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we usually, I've been seeing a lot of shows where you can't get 5 people to enter the class here.
Right.
So, I mean, they'll have, they just got the numbers. Aside from sponsorship at shows in Germany, do the show hosts also charge entry fees at the gate? So do spectators have to? Yeah.
No, all entry fee is done through the federation. You go to an online system that is made by the by the German Federation.
Yeah.
And all horse shows are listed there, and you put in your number because you have your own personal number, and then your entry system comes up, and you enter a class for €20, €20, €20. Put in the horses you might take, and when you get there, you're then responsible to pay what's called a start fee. And I don't know exactly how that system works in Germany. It could be that the start fee is gathered by the organizer.
Yeah.
And that they keep that. But I'm not entirely sure about that. I do know that it doesn't change, and the organizer can't charge whatever they want for a start fee. It's a set fee.
Yeah. So, and then do show managers in Germany advertise upcoming shows to the public to get more spectators?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they're held the same time every year, usually the same weekend every year. So, and getting spectators is a big deal, which is why if they can attract a higher level rider, and they also treat their riders like heroes, like sports heroes.
Yeah.
They are sports heroes in Germany.
Right.
So, for instance, by the time I reached license class 1 or 2, if I entered a show in Frankfurt, there would probably be a article about me in the local paper the day before the show. Catherine Haddad is coming to this show.
Yeah.
Because I would be traveling a long way to get there, and I would be one of the highest ranked riders there, and I was international. I came from the United States, so.
Right.
They would always do a personal interest story on one of the top riders that was coming. Yeah.
Cool. Very cool. Well, my head's kind of spinning. Sometimes when we talk about everything, like I know I'm saturated with ideas, and I really appreciate that Catherine came on and that you respond to my email and you're answering all these questions and you're willing to brainstorm all these ideas. So I really appreciate that.
And I'm totally open. I mean, I'm very easy to find on Facebook. If anybody's got a good idea, send it my way. We have a midterm board meeting in beginning of July, if I can put new business on the table, I'll be happy to, but a specific plan has to be put into place. These things, they germinate for a while. Task forces are formed, and people, there's brainstorming that has to be done. While a lot of people from this country have competed internationally, there's only a handful that have actually done business in Europe and actually, been immersed in that system for the decades that I was. So it's sometimes hard to bring those ideas to the table. When something's working in this country, people don't like to change it.
Right.
So it has to be shown, I think. I mean, in this country, the sport is much more elite than it was in Europe. It was much more accessible in Europe for every man. At the very, very top level, you still had this elite feeling because it was a big money sport.
Yeah.
But it was not the riders and the competitors who were paying the big bills.
Yeah.
Here it was.
Yeah. And I think like everyone I talk to is wants to change that and wants to grow the sport.
Mm-hmm.
When I meet with, everyone I talk to. So I don't think there's really, I keep hunting for this person. It's hard to point a finger, right? Like you hunting for like, it's your fault or it's this fault or it's this person's fault. It's the show manager. It's USEF's fault.
Not the fault of anyone.
It's like
the way our system has evolved.
Yeah. It's like we all need to just admit that it's like everybody's fault. You know what I mean? Like let's fix it. So I'm hopeful. I mean, you said it sounds like we got new leadership. I think that I'm hopeful in you, someone that spent 20 years in Germany where you've seen like the promised land, and we can maybe make some changes.
Mm-hmm. And it's not, I don't think you need to place blame anywhere or say you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think that you just need to bring people's attention to there's a better way.
Yeah.
And we have to be innovative.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you, Catherine. I really appreciate it. And I hope to keep this, I hope to keep this conversation going. And I really, really appreciate you coming on and spending some time here.
Glad that I could. Thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.